It feels as though, somewhere in this very moment, someone is standing at the edge of a life-changing choice they haven't shared with anyone. That person is your soulmate. Before you scroll away, stay with me, because what you're about to hear may resonate more deeply than you expect. Over the past few days, or perhaps even within the last few hours, your soulmate has likely found themselves alone with a thought they can't bring themselves to voice. They haven't spoken about it with friends. They haven't confessed it to family. They may not have fully admitted it to themselves. Yet at the center of that silent struggle is you. Here's something most people never realize. They rarely witness the exact moment their soulmate begins to unravel inside. They only understand it later, after the quiet distance, after the confusing silence, after the strange shift in energy that once felt impossible to explain but suddenly makes perfect sense in hindsight. Pause with that thought for a moment. Notice what your mind is doing. It's already trying to shield you from possibilities that feel uncomfortable. That reaction isn't weakness. It's not a flaw. It's simply your mind performing its oldest job, protecting your sense of emotional security until you're ready to face something more difficult. Carl Jung described this hidden psychological territory as the shadow, the concealed parts of ourselves that remain buried because they feel too vulnerable, too painful, or too honest to expose. Right now, your soulmate may be confronting that hidden side of themselves. Emotions they never expected are rising to the surface, and they don't know how to understand them, much less express them. This is where things become complicated. The human mind has a deep dislike for uncertainty. It would rather invent an explanation than tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. So as you listen, notice what your own thoughts begin doing. They start searching for answers. Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're uncertain. Maybe they're keeping something from me. See how quickly your mind races to solve the mystery instead of allowing the uncertainty to simply exist? Ironically, that's the very same battle your soulmate may be facing. Only their unanswered questions revolve around you. Sigmund Freud gave this process a name: repression. It's one of the earliest psychological defense mechanisms we develop. When an emotion feels too overwhelming or threatening to experience directly, the mind doesn't erase it. Instead, it buries it deep beneath conscious awareness. But hidden emotions don't disappear. They wait. They build pressure. Eventually, they reveal themselves indirectly through behaviors that seem unrelated to their true source. Perhaps someone suddenly becomes distant without explanation. Maybe they ask for space they can't fully justify. They become irritated over small things or emotionally withdrawn for reasons they can't explain. These reactions are rarely random. They're often signals that something buried is struggling to break through the surface. What many people never admit is that the emotion being suppressed isn't a lack of love or interest. More often, it's the overwhelming intensity of how deeply someone actually cares. Here's a truth people rarely say aloud. The individuals who unsettle us the most are rarely the ones we feel nothing for. They're the ones who have the greatest ability to change us. Think carefully about that. If your soulmate felt nothing significant toward you, there would be no need for repression. Defense mechanisms exist only when emotions become powerful enough to threaten our internal balance. Indifference doesn't require protection. Profound emotional attachment does. So, if you've experienced distance, if their silence has left you confused, if they suddenly seem emotionally unreachable, consider another possibility. Perhaps you aren't witnessing the absence of emotion. Perhaps you're witnessing emotions so overwhelming they've become disguised as withdrawal. Most people mistake distance for disinterest because it's the simplest explanation and often the least painful one. Yet, when the unconscious mind is involved, simple answers are rarely the most accurate. The unconscious doesn't function according to straightforward logic. It communicates through contradiction, symbolism, and psychological defenses. Your soulmate may currently be trapped inside one of those contradictions, longing for closeness while fearing it at the same time, wanting your presence yet instinctively creating distance. feeling dependent on the connection while convincing themselves they should resist it. That inner conflict is exhausting. And silence isn't proof that nothing is happening. Silence is often evidence that everything is happening beneath the surface. When someone becomes quiet, they may be engaged in the loudest internal conversation of their life. They're confronting old fears, revisiting painful memories, imagining countless possible outcomes, and trying to determine whether allowing themselves to love completely will ultimately heal them or leave them shattered. But now let's shift the focus, because this story isn't only about your soulmate, it's also about you. Jung believed that the people who affect us most deeply often act as psychological mirrors. They don't simply reflect who they are. They reveal the hidden aspects of ourselves we've yet to acknowledge. So if your soulmate is wrestling with fear, ask yourself an honest question. Could a similar fear exist within you? Have you become so focused on understanding their emotional struggle that you've overlooked your own? This is where our minds can quietly deceive us. Sometimes we become consumed by someone else's inner conflict because it keeps us from confronting our own. It's easier to wonder what they're hiding than to ask what we're hiding. It's easier to analyze their silence than to face our own fear of rejection, our fear of not being enough, our fear of loving deeply only to lose everything. So ask yourself something uncomfortable, not about them, about yourself. When you imagine your soulmate pulling away, what's the very first feeling that rises inside you? Is your immediate response concern for their well-being, or is it fear of what their distance means for you? Those emotions may seem similar, but they're fundamentally different. If what surfaces first is fear for yourself, there's nothing shameful about that. It's a deeply human response. But it also reveals something important. It may mean that what feels like worry for your soulmate is also awakening an old emotional wound within you. Perhaps someone once disappeared from your life without giving you answers. Perhaps you grew up believing love could be withdrawn without warning. Perhaps affection felt uncertain, conditional, or unpredictable, teaching you from an early age that closeness always carried the possibility of sudden loss. And this is exactly where the deepest psychological battles begin, because when that old emotional wound is active, it doesn't simply influence your feelings, it reshapes the way you interpret everything your soulmate does. One unanswered text can suddenly feel like abandonment. A shorter conversation than usual can seem like rejection. It's not because those moments truly mean what your mind tells you they mean. It's because your nervous system has learned to interpret the present through the lens of past pain. That isn't a personal flaw. It's one of the brain's oldest survival strategies. Once it experiences emotional danger, it begins recognizing similar situations as potential threats, hoping to protect you before you're hurt again. While that instinct can keep you safe, it can also convince you that history is repeating itself when it isn't. Which means that, at this very moment, you may not be carrying only your soulmate's emotional struggle. Without realizing it, you may also be carrying your own unresolved fears, blending both experiences together until they become impossible to separate. But let's look beneath the surface even further, because this story goes deeper than either of your individual emotions. What if your soulmate's inner conflict and your own hidden fears aren't isolated experiences at all? What if they're different expressions of the same unconscious pattern? Carl Jung referred to moments like these as synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to dismiss as chance. When two people share an unusually deep connection, their internal worlds often begin shifting at the same time. Not because one person directly causes the other's emotions, but because each begins awakening something that already existed within the other. Their emotional struggle stirs unresolved places inside you. Your unhealed fears awaken something within them. This isn't merely coincidence, it's emotional resonance. Most people never allow themselves to explore this level of understanding because doing so requires something the ego resists above all else: honest self-reflection with nowhere to hide. So instead of avoiding it, let's continue. What is your soulmate truly afraid of? Not the obvious questions, not whether the relationship will succeed, not whether they're making the right decision. Beneath those concerns usually lives something much older, something that existed long before you ever entered their life. The fear of losing themselves inside a connection powerful enough to change who they are. Real intimacy isn't simply about ending loneliness. The deepest kind of intimacy challenges identity itself. Imagine what it really means to be known by another person, not admired from a distance, not appreciated for your strengths, but fully seen. Every contradiction, every insecurity, every hidden wound you've spent years protecting from the outside world. There are few experiences more vulnerable than allowing another human being to truly know you. Your soulmate may be standing exactly at that threshold right now, and every defense mechanism they've built over the course of their life is urging them to retreat before they become too exposed. This is the truth they rarely admit. Not to you, not to the people closest to them, sometimes not even within their own private thoughts. Because acknowledging that level of vulnerability means admitting they care enough to be hurt. For a person whose heart has been wounded before, vulnerability doesn't immediately feel like love. It feels like danger. There's another layer many people overlook. Emotional crises like this rarely unfold in a straight line. They don't move steadily from confusion toward certainty. Instead, they move in cycles. One day, your soulmate seems closer than ever before. Their words fill you with hope. Their energy feels warm, open, and reassuring. Then, almost without warning, they seem distant again, leaving you searching through past conversations, wondering what changed. But perhaps nothing changed at all. What you're witnessing isn't a relationship moving forward and backward. You're witnessing an unconscious mind caught between two equally powerful forces, moving closer, pulling away, reaching out, stepping back, again and again. This is the rhythm of someone trying to balance longing with self-protection. Jung described this struggle as the tension of opposites. Psychological growth doesn't happen by completely choosing one side over another. It happens by remaining within that tension until something entirely new begins to emerge. Your soulmate isn't simply deciding whether they want you. They're deciding which version of themselves will shape their future. The version that survived by keeping walls around their heart, or the version slowly discovering that perhaps those walls are no longer necessary with you. That realization is far more frightening than most people realize, because lowering emotional defenses means dismantling protective habits built over years, sometimes a lifetime, one painful experience at a time. What they seldom reveal is how exhausting that internal battle truly becomes. Wanting to send the message, then deleting it, almost confessing how they feel, then choosing safer words instead, reaching toward connection, then retreating before they get too close. This isn't necessarily dishonesty. More often it's survival disguised as hesitation. If you've ever wondered why someone who clearly feels something struggles to express it openly, remember this. Complete honesty requires emotional safety. Not everyone grows up believing that honesty is safe. Some people learned very early that speaking openly led to criticism, rejection, disappointment, or abandonment. So their minds adapted. Instead of expressing emotions directly, they learned to communicate through fragments, through mixed signals, through pauses, through silence, not because the feelings are absent, but because expressing them has never truly felt safe. Now consider what's happening inside their body as all of this unfolds. This isn't only a psychological process, it's a physical one as well. As your connection deepens, their nervous system becomes increasingly activated. While part of them experiences warmth, another part instinctively prepares for danger. Their body begins responding through the same neural pathways that were shaped by earlier experiences of emotional pain. To a nervous system carrying unresolved attachment wounds, this person could leave me, and this person could become too important to lose, can trigger remarkably similar reactions. Both feel threatening. Both activate self-protection. Once you recognize this pattern, it becomes surprisingly familiar. Greater closeness creates greater fear. Instead of expressing that fear honestly, it begins showing up in other ways. Distance, overthinking, emotional withdrawal, irritability, sudden uncertainty, questioning the relationship itself, not because the relationship is fragile, but because it's becoming strong enough to challenge every emotional wall they built long before they ever met you. It sounds like one silent question keeps repeating beneath everything they're feeling. Is this connection truly safe enough to trust, or will it end the way every meaningful connection before it did? This is where the emotional pressure reaches its highest point, and it's important to understand something most people never explain clearly. You cannot ease this kind of fear by chasing them. You cannot resolve it by over-explaining your intentions. You cannot argue an unconscious wound into feeling secure, because the unconscious doesn't respond to logic. It responds to lived experience. It watches for consistency. It notices patience. Most importantly, it pays attention to whether the reactions it fears actually happen. If abandonment is their deepest wound, desperation from you may unintentionally reinforce it. If losing themselves is what frightens them most, pressure will only strengthen that fear. If they've spent their life believing they're emotionally overwhelming, urgency may convince them that belief was true all along. This is one of psychology's greatest paradoxes. The harder someone struggles to protect themselves from the very outcome they fear, the more likely they become to create it. And sometimes the same thing happens on your side. Their fear of losing love can slowly push love away. Their fear of losing their identity can distance them from the very relationship capable of helping them discover who they truly are. Likewise, your fear of losing them can quietly shape your behavior in ways that create more separation instead of less. Pause and really let that settle. Because everything we've explored has been leading to this realization. Neither of you is necessarily doing something wrong. You're both responding exactly as two nervous systems shaped by earlier pain naturally respond when confronted with a connection that genuinely matters. Your soulmate's internal crisis isn't proof that something is broken. It's evidence that something significant has been awakened. The mind doesn't launch its strongest defenses against something meaningless. It protects itself most fiercely from experiences capable of changing it forever. So what should you do? Don't pretend to feel certainty you don't genuinely have. Don't force answers that aren't ready to emerge. Don't rush a process that is still unfolding beneath layers neither of you can fully see yet. Instead, become the one constant within the uncertainty. Offer steadiness where their past taught instability. Remain present without becoming controlling. Care deeply without allowing fear to become desperation. Stay grounded when circumstances become confusing, not because you're ignoring what's happening, not because you're pretending everything is fine, but because you've begun to understand something many people never fully grasp. What your soulmate is experiencing isn't primarily a logical problem. It's an encounter with the oldest, most deeply buried parts of themselves. Now we arrive at the final layer that connects everything. Perhaps this relationship feels different because it was never meant to awaken only romantic feelings. Some connections awaken everything left unfinished within both people at the same time. That isn't evidence the relationship is flawed. It may be the very reason it exists. Certain relationships seem to arrive for one profound purpose, bringing hidden wounds, forgotten fears, and unresolved emotional patterns into the light, not to destroy the bond, but to give both people the opportunity to finally face what they've spent years, even decades, avoiding. Your soulmate's struggle has never been completely separate from your own. You've both been participating in the same emotional pattern, whether either of you has possessed the language to describe it or not. Their current conflict isn't random. It's what naturally happens when two inner worlds meet with enough depth to expose truths neither person could have uncovered alone. Many people will hear ideas like these and believe they're only about their soulmate. But that's only half the story. This is equally about the part of you that quietly recognized yourself in every insight. The fear you've mistaken for concern. The old wounds you've unknowingly projected onto present-day silence. The emotional patterns you didn't realize were also asking something of you. So release the illusion. Stop believing this is solely your soulmate's journey to navigate. Stop imagining your only responsibility is waiting while they sort themselves out. And stop assuming your own history, your own fears, and your unconscious habits play no role in what's unfolding between you. Because here's the truth this entire journey has been pointing toward from the very beginning. The greatest challenge your soulmate faces right now isn't deciding whether to choose you. It's confronting the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. You simply happen to be the mirror reflecting those hidden places with such clarity that looking away is no longer possible. That isn't a punishment. It isn't a burden. It's one of the rarest gifts two people can offer one another. The opportunity to stop running from themselves. Before we finish, there's one final idea worth exploring, because it explains why some relationships feel unlike anything we've experienced before. Jung believed each person carries an unconscious image of psychological wholeness, an inner blueprint representing qualities we long to integrate within ourselves. When someone unexpectedly reflects that hidden image, meeting them can feel strangely familiar. It's less like meeting someone new, and more like remembering someone you've always known. That overwhelming sense of recognition isn't necessarily supernatural. Psychologically, it can be understood as projection. The unconscious places its own longing for completeness onto another person, making them appear to embody something we believe we've been searching for all along. This is why soulmate connections often feel so intensely transformative. You're not only relating to another human being, you're also relating to the powerful symbolic meaning your own psyche has placed upon them. But every relationship built on projection eventually reaches an important turning point. The idealized image begins to dissolve. The real person, with all their imperfections, contradictions, fears, and humanity, finally comes into view. Many people mistake that moment for falling out of love. In reality, it may be where authentic love truly begins, because genuine love isn't built upon fantasy. It's built upon seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway. Here, one final fear often emerges, not simply the fear of losing the relationship, but the fear of loving another person once every illusion has disappeared, the fear of embracing someone real instead of someone imagined. And perhaps that's the deepest conflict your soulmate is facing. Not whether they care about you, but whether they're ready to love the real version of you without projections, without fantasies, without emotional hiding places. So don't turn away from that realization. Stay with it. Most people reach this point, become uncomfortable, and immediately distract themselves before the deeper understanding has time to settle. Allow it to settle. Allow yourself to consider that the uncertainty you've been feeling may not be evidence the connection is ending. Perhaps it's evidence that the connection has finally become real. The next time silence appears. The next time distance leaves you questioning everything. The next time the emotional atmosphere shifts in ways you can't explain. Resist the urge to panic. Resist the temptation to retreat behind your own defenses. Instead, recognize what may truly be unfolding, not the ending of something meaningful, but the beginning of the only kind of intimacy capable of lasting, the kind that remains standing after every illusion has fallen away, the kind that survives truth. And perhaps that's the secret almost no one shares about a connection this profound. It was never meant to be effortless. It was always meant to be transformative.